Hello and welcome to One Take CEO Interviews. I'm Dale Kurschner. Today's interview is with Jim Snoxell, who is CEO and also chairs the Business Law and Nonprofits Department at the law firm of Henningson Snoxell. This discussion is brought to you by Platinum Group, which for nearly 40 years has specialized in helping business leaders navigate through challenging times, ranging from selling their businesses, raising capital and refinancing, to surviving tough financial setbacks, legal challenges, and crisis situations. Jim, welcome to One Take.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So, when it comes to everything that's going on right now, people are really busy. Why should they tune into our conversation?
Well, the realities of COVID and all the upheaval that's going on in our society affects our businesses in a lot of different ways. The niche, if you want to call it that Henningson and Snoxell brings is not only the experience we're having dealing with all of the challenges these interesting times throw at us, but obviously there's a lot of legal aspects to it too. And we're getting a lot of calls from our for-profit and our nonprofit clientele asking, what the heck do we do now? And of course, as soon as we tell them, the next day something changes and we have to tell them something different.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like anyway.
So what is the kind of the most popular question you're getting right now from folks out there?
Mm-hmm. Well, probably the biggest topic has been, what do I do with employees? That's especially going back to the early days of, when we were working at home and a lot of businesses had to furlough people, let people go. But it's continuing on now as we move into the realm of businesses thinking about bringing people back. Not only, who should we bring back? Do we need to bring people back? How do we balance our perceived business need to have people doing work that is best done at the office with the reality that we still have an executive order out there that says if you can work at home, you're supposed to work at home. So there's a lot of employment law related issues.
And you mentioned that changes on a regular basis. How do you keep up with all that?
Well, it isn't easy. We read these executive orders, and believe me, they are fun, dense, long reading to try to figure out what the governor is saying. But we are trying to balance both the real world practical side of things, like the CDC recommendations, the Minnesota Department of Health recommendations, because they're incorporated in a lot of practical ways in what the letter of the law, if you want to call it that, or the letter of the executive order says we're supposed to be doing.
Sure. And what's a good example, Jim, of something where you've helped a client with all this that might also be applicable to a lot of other people listening and watching right now?
Well, it's kind of with the planning side of things, I'd say overall. The concept is relatively understandable to most people. And things have settled down enough in the medical world that we understand the need for masks when we're outside of our offices. We understand the need for social distancing. But taking those concepts and applying them in a workplace is still pretty tricky. That's especially true because over time we've seen more and more employers call up and say, the expectations among our staff is really starting to change here. And we're both seeing the opportunity that comes from working at home, from not following a dress code anymore. But we're also starting to worry about how we're going to get certain things done that are best done in the office. And that's where the legal requirements come into play. We're, of course, also having to, help people deal with the reality that, okay, somebody in the office has been exposed to somebody, or somebody in the office actually has had a positive COVID test. What do we do now? And I try to resist the temptation to say, well, remember when we recommended putting a preparedness plan together? I don't.
Well, shouldn't everybody have that though? I mean,
yeah.
When it comes to a lot of other things the state's looking for, I thought you should have a preparedness plan before you bring people back.
It is one of the requirements that even now, even when we aren't necessarily bringing everybody back in the office, that we have the state calls it a COVID preparedness plan. What it really is a plan for how we're going to deal with the different aspects of doing business with the restrictions and some of the requirements that are out there.
Okay. Just wondering, is there something that's kind of one common point that everybody should think about on this subject?
On the subject of preparedness plans,
And bringing people back. Yeah, bringing people back to work.
well, the biggest issue I think is twofold. It's the practical point of when do we need to bring somebody back, and do we really need to bring somebody back? And that goes to questions of productivity, how well it's working for people working from home. For us, it's worked really well, better than I expected. But different businesses, different industries, you're going to have different experiences. But the other side of things, and this is something that leadership really has to pay attention to, is what's the employee comfort level? What's the employee expectations? That's changing. One of the consequences, I think, of the COVID situation is the acceleration of several trends that were already in existence. Working from home is probably the best example. As lawyers, the dress code is something else that is irrevocably changed. I realized when I got dressed this morning, this is the third time I've put a tie on since the initial governor order back in, when was that, March?
You look nice, by the way.
Thank you. So I think thinking it through on the practical side, and then working with counsel or other advisors to connect the dots with what you really are supposed to be doing under the governor orders.
Okay. And then I also have heard from just talking with people that contracts are getting more and more interesting. We had the stimulus funding for a while, and we had that breathing room, but things are getting tighter now. What are you seeing on the contract law side?
Well, it's both good news and bad news. The biggest contract issue is the reality that businesses can't perform all of their obligations on time in the way that their contracts call for. Now, I've actually been very pleasantly surprised that until recently, most of that's been working out. Now, I hope that my experience and our clients' experiences are not unique. But it's like everybody recognized these are weird times. You can't perform through no fault of your own. We can get by without, we'll accommodate. But the chickens are coming home to roost because you can't do that forever. Just in the last 6 to 8 weeks, we've really started to talk to clients where they have a problem because they can't pay the rent. The landlord needs the rent to pay the mortgage company, and so far up the line. We're also dealing with situations where clients can't get the parts or get the product or get whatever it is that they contracted for from a supplier. The supplier can't produce it for one reason or another related to COVID. Now, whether the system is starting to show the strain of this continuing on and on and on, and that's what's triggering it, that's my suspicion as to what's happening. But it does produce a legal issue, which is, what do we do? Now, many contracts include what's called a force majeure event, an act of God clause. But in Minnesota, though, everybody thinks of those in terms of a blizzard that keeps me from shipping my product off of the loading dock to the customer. Nobody was thinking of pandemic that had a huge impact on the economy.
But that is what it applies for here, though, right? It is what typically, if we have a blizzard or something, right?
Yep, this clause, if it exists, is the first thing you look for. Now, sometimes clauses are written broadly enough that they're helpful. Sometimes they're written in ways that don't do any good for anybody. It still is boiling down to the practical reality. Both parties are going to have an issue here, and hopefully they can work it out. And so far, so good. How long that can continue, we're seeing more and more strain.
We haven't really seen a case in the courts yet on that, have we? I mean, we've seen some insurance-related cases, but not contract.
We have been involved in plenty of instances where that was the direction that we were going. But, Minnesotans are still, by and large, fairly rational. Even people outside of Minnesota in the business world can still be rational. And so far we've been able to work things out. There's one case that just a couple of days ago, a long-standing client, big-time problem with the landlord. And for some reason, the landlord's difficult, and we're going to have to see if we can get them to be reasonable. We're seeing more and more difficulty, but we've been able to help facilitate a resolution that so far has kept our clients out of ugly court proceedings that may or may not do any good. It takes a long time to get into court. It takes a long time to work things through the court system. And believe me, we've got a good group of litigators here who are raring to go when need be, but people in my department, we try to keep these things from going to court.
Yep. Well, let's switch gears for a second. Let's talk about your firm. Tell us how many people work there and how have things changed when it comes to how you've led and how you've kept everybody motivated over this period of time.
We've got right now just under 40 people fully employed. They're all full-time. We do have a couple of part-timers. I keep forgetting about Jen, who's the one who takes care of our technology, for example. The biggest change has been people working from home more than we have before. Our attorneys have always been able to work at home. Paralegals did not seem to want to, but now they're fully equipped to, and they're finding that that really works well. Most of our administrative staff works some of the time at home. So, we've got these nice offices, and rarely are more than 50% of the folks here. From a management point of view, this puts a challenge and some obstacles in place for our department chairs and for me. It just isn't as easy to communicate with people by telephone and through Zoom like this than we're used to. I still get up, I don't know how often, start to walk down the hall to see Craig or Deborah or somebody and realize, oh yeah, that's right, she's working at home today. It is funny, that psychology, out of sight, out of mind, and that does affect communication. I do think keeping in touch with people on a personal level is absolutely critical. I have made a point, and our department heads are really glad to do this, that they need to be in touch with, taking the initiative, call up, get in touch with the people they work with.
Every week, right? They're calling everybody?
At least,
yeah.
Yep. A minimum of once a week. And anytime there's any kind of a client question or issue, you pick up the phone. Don't send an email. That's helped. The objective measure I have to work with is the hours that are being put in and how they're being reported. And they're holding up. We're, in fact, if anything, maybe a little more productive with people working at home than they were when they're in the office. So we're really pleased with that.
And Jim, tell people a little bit about what you are doing for the folks who do come into the office. You mentioned earlier that for some of your clients, there's the need to really understand how your employees are feeling about bringing them back in.
Yes.
What have you done?
Well, of course, the first thing we did was, buy all of the protective equipment. We've got enough plexiglass around here to equip a hockey rink. And you set the rules down, the wearing of masks per the governor's orders. We were requiring masks to be worn before we reached that point. Especially in the first half of the time where work from home was so prevalent, it dawned on us that bringing lunch in once a week went over well. People weren't comfortable going out to their usual haunts for lunch, and then the restaurants were shut down. So you bring in pizza, you bring in takeout Italian, and people really liked that more than I thought. I thought it was just a nice gesture, but lo and behold, we'd be in our large training room 6 feet apart, but there'd be a dozen or so of us, and everybody was talking and having a good time, and it was safe, thanks to plexiglass and and social distancing. Our office has long had a summer hours where we knock off a little early on Fridays, along with the rest of the Minnesota world. We extended that through September as a little gesture of thanks to our staff, and that has been well received. To me, and I haven't done as much of this as I should, but I've tried. I make a point of walking around every day, and we have kind of a funny layout here, so the two ends of the office are actually a bit far apart psychologically, as well as a good walk. So I just make a point of going around and saying hi to everybody. I've tried to do that from the beginning. Most days I'm able to do it. I'm wearing a mask. Nobody has said, get away from me, you're carrying the plague. And I think it's just important to be seen, to make it plain to people, hey, I know you're here. Thanks, for doing that.
Yep.
We do have monthly all-staff meetings, and we make the point to our paralegals and our administrative staff that we know they're working, we appreciate it, we try to keep them informed. I think that's important.
Yeah. Jim, is there a question I should have asked you that I haven't asked you today?
Well, I don't know if it's a question, but let me share a thought that isn't exactly business CEO-like related. It took me a while to realize this, but there's no question that the ongoing COVID and all of the social unrest and political discomfort that we've got going right now, I think that's really contributing to a stress level. I kind of wasn't aware of it in myself until I noticed that I was uttering an occasional unhappy remark about some computer frustrations that I would not have done before. Had a couple of conversations with some of the folks I'm closer with in the office, and we've all come to acknowledge that, we're feeling some stress. COVID's bad enough, you throw in all the other stuff, plus the always ongoing realities of being in business and having to deal with all of the normal stuff, which every company has. I think we have to make some allowances for that and be aware of it. I've seen people here overreact based on historic norms to a frustration or to something that doesn't go right. We've had some conversations, usually one-on-one, 2 or 3 people together about, yeah, I'm feeling the stress. And we don't even know it because it's kind of crept up. It wasn't so bad that first 3 weeks or so, but it just keeps coming at us.
That's
and the reality that we don't have an endpoint in mind.
That's a really
My
good
wife's a psychologist who works in a hospital setting. She's confirmed that this is a reality in the workplace. And, we both have to be aware of it in ourselves, and we have to take that into consideration, I think, as we deal with our people and in our clients, because they too are feeling some of this.
Well, that's an excellent point. I mean, I've noticed it. I've noticed less smiles and more frowns everywhere. But real quickly, we're almost completely out of time here, but how are you dealing with it? How are you dealing with it personally? As you notice that you're saying things underneath your breath about your computer or other things, how are you dealing with this stressful time?
Well, once we recognize what's happening, it makes it easier to deal with. I've upped my exercise regime. I am a person of faith, and that gives me something that is helpful in this context. And, once you recognize something, you start seeing how it manifests itself in you. We're all pretty good at controlling our behaviors, and take a nice long walk now and then, something I like to do. So
that sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, thank you for your time today with us.
You're very welcome. Best wishes to you and to all of you've taken a few minutes to listen to this, and we'll get through it.
Yep, we will. Thanks. And I want to thank our sponsor one more time, the Platinum Group, which for 40 years has helped companies during turbulent times such as these. If your company can use some advice or just a second opinion, you can learn more about the Platinum Group at the website, theplatinumgrp.com. I also want to thank all of you for tuning in today.
I didn't realize it had been 40 years at Platinum. 40 years for H&S next month.
Okay. Well,
next year. Yeah.
Congratulations.
And to you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to everybody else for tuning in today. We'll see you next time on One Take.